Next, just two more areas where there's harmful environmental effects. One is in tailings ponds. These are often the waste and impurities from the mined ore, things that were part of the mining process, but really things that we really don't want out of the rocks and ores that we are extracting the minerals from. These are usually left either just plain on the ground and called tailings piles, or they're in ponds and sometimes referred to as a tailings pond. These typically contain quite a few toxins, things like cyanide, mercury, acid, sulfuric acid. Um, there was recently a case in North Carolina. There was a large tailings pond, kind of had a blowout, overflow, and went into a place called the Dan River. Very, very toxic. Lots of fish kill, people's water contaminated. This is probably one of the most detrimental effects when it comes to the refining process, is what to do with the impurities once the mineral that you want has been removed. Another very important effect of refining is the smelting plants themselves. These usually contribute highly to the amount of air pollution. A lot of times those sulfur dioxide compounds, to remove those, you would need to put in a scrubber. To remove the particulate matter, you need an electrostatic precipitator. These are expensive. Company doesn't want to put those on unless they absolutely have to. Um, and so this is contributing greatly to our pollution that we have in the Pittsburgh area from these smelting operations. A lot of times also in the refining you get cadmium. It just seems to be a metal that comes with a lot of other metals like lead and uh, lead and zinc. Cadmium just usually seems to be right there with those, and cadmium not used that heavily, but it's a very toxic mineral as well. There are some laws that deal with mining. Probably the most important, significant one in recent history has been the Surface Mining Control and Reclamation Act of 1977. Remember, a lot of these environmental laws, the cleanup, all started in the early 70s with a big growth in the environmental movement. This law was really the first law, believe it or not, after hundreds of years of mining, that requires that there be reclamation for areas of coal mining. That was a great change to what things were before, that places where there was strip mining particularly, that they had to then be reclaimed. They had to be put back, so you could no longer just come in and dig out the coal. And then before 1977, they essentially came and dug that out, and whatever the ground was like when they were finished, that's how they left the area. Big piles of excess coal around, the overburden just in irregular patterns wherever it happened to be piled up. That was it. So this was a huge change. The big detriment to the Surface Mining Control and Reclamation Act is that it only is for coal. So there's a lot of other mining that goes on besides coal, but this law only pertains to coal. It regulated just present mines, and it did provide cleanup of sites for older mines, and those older mines were then funded through a tax that was placed on coal that was based per ton of coal produced. Another law that's been really significant, and again, look at the date of this, the General Mining Law of 1872. This pertains mostly to mining on federal lands, and federal lands, as we know, in the western states are pretty significant. The goal of this law was actually to encourage people to go west and to develop the resources that were in the west as far as gold, silver, copper mining, etc. Here, a person could basically file a claim of ownership on U.S. public land. They had to believe that the land contained minerals. They had to spend some money to improve that. Think that this law was in 1872, and it was required that they spend $500 to improve it for mineral development. It doesn't say necessarily how that $500 needed to be spent. And the land could be claimed by the price of $2.50 to $5 per acre. I would guess probably a lot in Upper St. Clair, not even an acre, probably goes for around $60,000. That law has kept that price the same since 1872. You pay $120 a year to claim 20 acres to maintain your claim. Once you claim that, then you can decide whether you actually want to use that for yourself, or you can lease it, you can sell it, and use it basically for any other purpose. You can see that this law had a lot of flaws to it. It was maybe pretty important back in 1872 as the West was unsettled, but once you end up with cities like Las Vegas and Los Angeles, San Francisco, and a lot of more development in the western states, then this law had some issues. But it wasn't until 1995 that Congress actually said, you know what, we're going to not allow there to be any more transfers of land that was taken over by this general mining law of 1872. And again, what we talked about our last chapter with the land use, we can see that a significant amount of the land in the West is owned by the federal government. Pretty big issue. Pretty much a law that pretty much superseded the general mining law of 1872 was the Federal Land Policy and Management Act. Even though that law, the general mining law, is still on the books, a lot of the information in the Federal Land Policy Act does kind of trump what's in that law. It requires reclamation of federal lands. That's another key point. It requires mining permits and plans before the land is touched. So it does have a significant impact. So I kind of blast that general mining law that it's still on the books even since 1872. But we do have other laws that are in place that are do take precedence over the law from 1872. There have been attempts to change the law even more to have Hard Rock Mining and Reclamation Act. There was an attempt in 2007 and 2009 for this. This will require reclamation on all types of mining, just in addition to coal mining. So whether it's a copper mine, a silver mine, a salt mine, anything like that, a limestone quarry, that there would have to be reclamation there. But unfortunately, none of these has ever gotten out of Congress. There's just been too much backlash and not enough support for these laws. So what do we do with these lands if there's not any government requirement that they be restored? The issue is, as always, money. The Department of Interior estimates that there are 500,000 surface mine sites, and the cost to clean these up would be over $70 billion. And that's a lot of money. So what we hope to do, though, by restoration is to prevent further degradation. So in those areas where we do have money to spend, that's the goal, is to prevent degradation and erosion of the land. We want to take those toxins that might be there in those tailings ponds and spoil piles and try to neutralize or eliminate those. We want to make the land productive for other uses. That's all important goals of restoration. This is showing a couple pictures here of a mine in Missouri. You can see the before and the after pictures. Here's another in the same state, and you can see before. This was very typical before the Mining Reclamation Act of 1977 to see an area like this that had come through and when strip mined and just basically piles of things, places where water collected, no growth at all. And then we end up with this afterwards, and this will continue to grow and change as secession occurs. So basically, what are the steps whenever there is restoration? Pretty much the first thing that needs to be done is backfilling. You've usually dug some sort of big hole out in the ground, so you have to fill that back in. Next, it's graded properly. This doesn't mean you just make it flat. You try to have it meet the contour of the land, whatever it was prior to the mining. You have to think about the water sources. Where's the water going to go? Will it pick up toxins as it goes through this restored area or this backfilled area? So is there a way that we need to divert the water towards a stream or maybe perhaps away from a stream? Another thing that has been done is on-site, remember the in situ word, biological treatment. So there are some types of biological agents that we can use that will help clean and restore this, and treatment of mine pools. Another method that's currently being used is something called phytoremediation, where we use light to remediate these areas. When we think about mineral resources, another key part of this we have to remember is that these mineral sources have a finite supply. There's only so much iron, there's only so much aluminum. Even though there's a lot of those, there's still just a limited supply overall. Other minerals are much more rare, and these supplies are not distributed evenly. So the import and export of these has a lot of political implications as well. In the last couple years, there's been more of a demand for what are called the rare earth metals. These on the periodic table, there's two bottom rows. And as we've developed higher level technology, iPhones and high-speed computers, they are actually using a lot of these rare earth elements, and we really don't have much of a supply in those in the United States. And where we're getting them from, China actually has a lot of these rare earth metals. Currently, the United States, Canada, Russia, South Africa, and Australia are very big suppliers and both users of non-renewable minerals. South Africa has lots of chromium, lots of platinum. The United States, Germany, and Russia consume 75% of all metals, while the three of us together, only have 8% of the world's population. In the U.S., we actually have depleted our supply of lead, aluminum, and iron. We really have no more bauxite, aluminum ore. We have very little iron ore in this country. So all of that are things that need to be imported. There's actually what the government would consider 20 key minerals, and these are ones that are needed for our economy and strategically as well for economic and military strength. Other things like manganese, cobalt, chromium, platinum. We have little to no reserves of these metals in the U.S. Tungsten, another important one that used in electrodes, rocket engines, turbine blades, titanium for armor plating. Again, these are ones that are very short supply in the U.S. With these minerals, we have to think about mineral reserves. A couple different categories here. Mineral reserves are those that are currently profitable to extract, and mineral resources are those that may be profitable at some point in the future. Typically, the governments subsidize development of mineral resources to promote economic growth. So we want to be able to take these resources and be able to turn them into reserves. And if we figure out the technology to get these resources to reserves, then that's going to increase our overall economy as well.